Welcome everyone to the 6th episode of Ability Academy. Today we'll be taking a look at the Justified, Rattled, Cheek Pouch, Fur Coat, Magician, Competitive, Moody, Overcoat, Skill Link, and Download abilities. The Justified ability is a rare ability generally possessed only by the members of the legendary Swords of Justice, though it can be found in a handful of other species and is a direct consequence of their unique brain structure and its reactions towards anti-positive energy. Pokémon in possession of this ability are different from simpler creatures because they are automatically born with a small nodule attached to their adrenal gland that normally should not exist. This strange nodule is in fact a highly sensitive sac of tissue that reacts strongly in the presence of anti-positive energy, and induces an electrical current when activated that causes the adrenal gland to release copious amounts of adrenaline into the possessor's system. While the long-term effects of this ability on the bodies of those that possess it tend to not be too severe, it can make them a bit harder to control in the presence of Dark-type Pokémon and offenses. Thanks to the nodule that acts as the source of this ability, if a Pokémon in possession of this ability is struck by a Dark-type attack, the nodule will automatically activate and send the possessor's adrenal gland into overdrive, raising the possessor's attack stat with every single strike. As far as technical advantages go, while the Justified ability is not powerful enough to make much of a difference in most battles, when fighting against dark types, this ability can at least help keep the physical offenses of the possessor high and make it difficult for the opponent to resist the increased damage brought on by its effects. The Rattled ability is a rare ability normally only seen among a limited selection of Pokémon, but also exists as a hidden ability for quite a few more species and is generally possessed by Pokémon that are not as resistant against fear-based offenses as others might be. In short, Pokémon in possession of this ability are different from other members of the same species in that they are easier to frighten in battle and respond much more intensely to attacks that are designed to inflict fear and terror with every strike, even if that reaction is created unintentionally. This can present problems in terms of being able to properly train these beasts to not be so easily scared by others, but such efforts can only go so far, with Bug, Dark, and Ghost type attacks triggering an immediate fight or flight response without fail. As a result of their heightened fear response, Pokémon in possession of this ability are easily frightened when struck with a type of attack that can easily induce fear, namely Bug, Dark, and Ghost type attacks. While this fear might not have any truly direct effects to it, it is beneficial in that it sends the possessor into a panic state, increasing their speed stat with every strike in the process. The Rattled ability is certainly not one that can be used for any substantial strategies, but it nonetheless can serve as a nice defensive ability when facing opponents with access to Bug, Dark, or Ghost type attacks, and can at the very least give slower Pokémon the chance to catch up and eventually outmaneuver their frightening assailant. However, at the same time, while it might not have any true tactical disadvantages, Pokémon that possess this ability will usually be much easier to scare on a regular basis. The Cheek Pouch ability is a fairly rare ability only seen among the members of the Bunnelby and Squilvin families, as well as the Dene and Mousehold, as a result of their relatively close genetic relationship to non-Pokémon rodents. Pokémon with this ability have a habit of storing some food in their mouths for long periods of time as a safeguard against detection. As a result, the saliva is able to absorb nutrients directly from the food they may be eating if they are forced to silence their movements in order to remain hidden or otherwise avoid a predator attack. While this normally does not impact their actual skills in battle, if a Pokémon with this ability eats a berry in battle, regardless of whatever effects it might normally have, their saliva will extract additional nutrients from the food item and will use it to charge their energy reserves, in turn giving them a notable health boost alongside whatever other effects the held berry might have otherwise granted them. As long as this ability is active, when a Pokémon with this ability consumes a berry of some sort, the added nutrients they are able to extract from the berry have the effect of automatically restoring the health of the possessor by 33.33% of its maximum HP, in addition to whatever effects the berry normally had on the Pokémon when eaten. The Cheek Pouch ability is not exactly the most life-saving abilities out there, and it's only really useful in certain situations, but if a Pokémon is holding onto a berry and is in desperate need of an energy recharge, this ability can help them extend the benefits of the held berry in battle, and potentially help them survive an otherwise dangerous onslaught for a bit longer. The Fur Coat ability is an extremely rare ability, possessed only by Furfrou and a lowland Persian, and serves as one of their few really useful defensive perks in battle. Compared to many other mammals, the hair of these beasts is very thick and plush to the extreme, and makes them easy and fun to groom and play with, but what makes it truly extraordinary is the fact that it also can act as a massive kinetic sink, absorbing large amounts of kinetic energy and dispersing it across the surface of the coat. While it is likely that a lowland Persian possess access to this ability because such a feature has been selectively bred onto them, in the case of Furfrou, this appears to be a natural attribute of their coat and thus gives them greater styling choices for those looking to really trick them out. As such, the softness factor of the coat seems to be the primary reason for human preference over it, regardless of the combat advantage it might otherwise offer. Because the thick fur coats of these creatures can absorb and redistribute kinetic energy effectively enough to lessen the blow they take from any sort of physical attack, this means that the damage dealt to Pokémon in possession of this ability by any physical attack is reduced, the defense stat being doubled as a consequence of this ability's presence. This also extends to the effects of moves that deal damage based on the possessor's defense stat, namely Side Shock, Side Strike, and Secret Sword, regardless of the means of execution or the actual structure of the attack. The Fur Coat ability is unlikely to be of much use to most trainers due to its limited occurrence among Pokemon, but it can nonetheless thoroughly aggravate the opposition in battle if they only have physical attacks to rely on, and in turn enables Furfrou or Lowland Persian to survive otherwise devastating attacks in battle and potentially put up a bit of a fight, even if the offenses and other special attributes of these species are otherwise fairly limited. The fact that it also makes the coat extremely soft and comfortable to play with and groom is another plus for those that prefer to avoid battles and just enjoy the Pokemon as they are. The Magician ability is a unique ability normally only observed in Hoopa, but also rarely seen among the members of the Fennekin family in Klefki, as a result of their unique elemental powers and capacity to easily trick and mesmerize the opposition. In essence, Pokemon that are in possession of this ability are more cunning and trickier than normal members of the same species, and have a strong sense of kleptomania and a knack for being able to take things from others without them ever actually noticing. While it is far from the only ability that could render this sort of effect, it stands out because it mainly relies on the special powers of the possessor in order for the ability to function, often using magic of some sort to dazzle others, or at least distract them before stealing the held item without them knowing better for at least a bit of time, more than enough to make use of said item personally. As such, this ability acts as a permanent variation of the basic Thief and Covet attacks in that, when the possessor successfully makes contact from an opponent with a damaging move, while the target is recovering from the attack, the possessor can quickly move to their side of the battlefield and steal whatever held item the target may have been holding. This will obviously fail if the possessor already has a held item on them, but the ability is otherwise impossible to overcome, as the Future Sight and Doom Desire attacks are the only attacks that will not provide the opportunity to steal the opponent's held item due to the unique execution style. While the Magician ability may not be very common, it is even more effective than the Pickpocket ability, which has these same effects but requires that both parties make direct contact. As such, this ability is the perfect way to steal a rare item from an opponent, or otherwise shut down any strategies they might have that require the use of a held item to even work. The Competitive ability effectively acts as a special attack equivalent of the Defiant ability, and in turn operates much in the same way. Pokemon in possession of this ability tend to disobey the orders of both their trainers and other Pokemon of a different species occasionally for the sake of competition, and will often attack with their own personal strategies in mind, completely ignoring whatever carefully laid out plans the trainer might have just to prove that they can outdo their opponent. While this may be nothing more than a slight irritation in most cases, this also has the effect of making them a little prideful and more easily angered in battle, and if an opponent uses a move of some sort that is meant to lower the stats of a Pokemon with this ability, their competitive spirit will flare up immediately and boost the special attributes to wipe out those that would dare defile them in any way. As such, when a Pokemon uses a move that lowers the possessor's stats in any way, as long as the attacker is not an ally in battle, the possessor will become so enraged that it will purposely overload itself with energy from its body, heightening its special attributes beyond normal and thus automatically increasing its special attack stat by a critical degree, about twice as much as normal. The Competitive ability is an excellent weapon against opponents that use stat-lowering moves to soften up their opponents in battle before going in for an easy win. It may not prevent such reductions from happening, but at the very least this ability can ensure that whatever special attacks an opponent receives from then on will be far more destructive than they could ever possibly imagine. However, it is also known that the possessor will generally be a bit more difficult to train and will take some time to befriend and form a bond with in most cases. The Moody ability is a hidden ability that comes as a result of certain species being capable of possessing distasteful moods that rapidly alternate and render them mentally unstable to a fault. Pokemon in possession of this ability generally possess some sort of bipolar disorder that causes their mood to switch dramatically and oftentimes randomly in and outside of battle, in turn making them a bit difficult to train on a regular basis. Not only can this prove to be a serious safety concern in most cases, but it can make it hard to direct any sort of strategy that a trainer would like to use if it involves a Pokemon with this ability, as these shifts in mood will directly impact the stats of the Pokemon with this ability as well, making nearly any battle a roll of the die at the very best. Aside from proving to be a serious behavioral problem to deal with, the unstable mood that highlights the presence of this ability will essentially cause one of the possessor's stats to critically increase at the end of every combat turn, about twice as much as normal, while another stat is lowered by one level at the same time. Those stats that are already at the maximum or minimum will never be chosen for the effect. The Moody ability is a bit of a double-edged sword that can prove to be both a great advantage and disadvantage regardless of the situation in battle. The fact that the stats chosen for the effects at the end of every turn are random more than makes the ability a bit of a gamble in battle, but for those willing to risk it, it can potentially pay off in spades with a bit of luck. However, since one stat aside from the one that is increased will always be lowered one stat level when the ability activates, the chances of it lowering a stat that needs to remain high are large enough to make the ability worth staying away from for safety purposes. Moreover, the fact that the ability itself is a product of a bipolar disorder can make the possession more difficult to train, let alone safe to go near or interact with. The Overcoat ability comes as a direct result of Pokemon possessing certain types of exterior protection that help to buffer against damage done by abrasive weather conditions. In effect, Pokemon in possession of this ability possess some sort of thick coat, whether it be made from armor, thin shields like leaves, feathers, or even gel-like protoplasm, that helps to directly buffer against unfriendly weather conditions to try and keep them at bay, particularly sandstorms and hail. It is currently unknown what makes these particular covers special, but it is believed by some that has to do with how the protection separates damage done to the exterior from damage done to the interior body, which would explain then why it often exists as a layer of protection separate from the core body. Either way, it allows these Pokemon to find a foothold in even the most inhospitable of environments, even if they are not inherently designed to live within them. Regardless of why this cloaked armor is required and what it even is composed of, Pokemon in possession of this ability are completely protected from the damaging effects of all abrasive weather conditions in and outside of battle, as well as the effects of powder-based moves like Sleep Powder and Poison Powder and the Effect Spore ability. The Overcoat ability is the perfect defense against abrasive weather conditions of all types, and while it might not be able to provide much in the way of protection against direct assault, it can at the very least keep suffering Pokemon safe from being defeated in a rather cheap manner by the effects of bad weather or powder-based actions. The Skill Link ability is a rare and devastating ability generally only possessed by the members of the Shelter and Pick-a-Peck families, but it is rarely observed in a few others, and takes the otherwise hit-and-miss characteristics of multi-strike moves and turns them into a weapon of true terror. Pokemon in possession of this ability are strikingly different from others in that they can use multi-strike attacks to an abnormal efficiency, as a result of either being able to mass-produce projectiles at an astounding rate, or otherwise being able to strike directly with such intense accuracy that an opponent cannot dodge any of the attack volleys that come their way. Since most attacks that can strike multiple times tend to be rather weak and thus have a low potential to actually inflict significant damage on their own, they are often considered to be unreliable and are substituted for different forms of offense. With this added skill of projectile volume, however, these moves are rather devastating weapons that can take down opponents in a hurry if used wisely. In short, as a consequence for the penchant for rapid ammunition generation or exceptional accuracy, Pokemon in possession of this ability that use any sort of multi-strike attack that is designed to hit multiple times will automatically strike the maximum number of times possible when the attack manages to connect with a target. The Skill Link ability is a monstrous weapon that can turn otherwise low-powered pointless attacks into defense-rattling waves of pain that can quickly deal massive amounts of damage for an exceptionally low stamina cost, and turn making it a terrible idea to do anything else other than run away as fast as possible until the volleys of close-quarter strikes are spread wide enough to make dodging more likely to succeed. The Download ability is a fairly unique ability only possessed by the members of the Porygon family in Genesect, most likely because of their artificial origins and or modifications. Pokemon that possess the Download ability can utilize their advanced analyzing technology to scan an opponent the moment it enters the battlefield and locate their points of greatest weakness in terms of defense. This is a system protocol put in place as a tool of offense above anything else, as the protocol itself ensures that the possessor of this ability has an offensive boost to its physical or special attributes in order to overcome enemies, a bit of extra power added for the sake of ensuring a quick knockout. Moreover, because this protocol is designed as literal programming, it is usually able to work without fail in most situations, and thus can be a great boon to the few cybernetic Pokemon that have access to it. When this ability is rendered active on the first turn the possessor is introduced into the battlefield, if the opponent's defense stat is higher than a special defense stat, the possessor will automatically adjust their combat style and raise their special attack stat in response. Consequently, if the opponent's special defense stat is higher than their defense stat, the possessor's attack stat will be raised. If both stats are equal, the possessor will switch to its superior weapon systems and raise his special attack stat as an automatic safeguard. In cases where there are multiple opponents on the battlefield, the possessor of this ability will combine the stats of their closest opponents and calculate the best course of action to take from there. The Download ability is a menacing force that can easily make the possessor extremely difficult to overcome depending upon the defenses of the opposition, and is probably one of the most dangerous abilities to ever face in battle, more than making the otherwise quirky members of the Porygon family, and especially Genesect, deceptively dangerous offensive fighters on the battlefield. That's it for this episode, so stay tuned for the next episode of Ability Academy. Thank you all for watching this video. It is a great pleasure to share with you all the fruits of my research and all the positives it gives to understanding the wonderful creatures we call Pokemon and how their powers and behaviors function in their world. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more work like it, please give a like, comment, and or subscribe to the channel so you can get regular notifications on when new content is being uploaded. You can also find links to my DeviantArt page, Patreon, and Discord server in the description below. Please, join me on this road to seeing what the world of Pokemon has to share with us, and the many mysteries and wonders that keep us all coming back for more.